Hello and welcome to the channel. I am here for a ranking video for you guys. Now, for this ranking, we'll be ranking the Killswitch Engage discography. Now, Killswitch Engage is one of those bands I do wish I would have gotten into sooner. I got into them sometime in 2016, which I know is rather late, because I do wish I would have gotten into them during my, early days of being into metalcore, but I don't know, they just weren't up my alley for some reason. And that's kind of surprising too, since they are one of the pioneers of metalcore. And with that being said, I'd say that Killswitch Engage is definitely an essential band if you listen to metalcore. And if you call yourself a metalcore fan, not a fan of Killswitch Engage, you might as well not even be a metalcore fan. That's how essential these guys really are. I mean, I'm definitely glad I got into them, even though I got into them a little bit later, of course. Now, keep in mind, I don't think Killswitch Engage has ever released a bad album, but some albums are obviously better than others. We'll of course go from worst to best. Now, there's something else to keep in mind. My opinions might be a little unpopular, maybe with some of them, maybe not all of them, but keep in mind this is just my opinion. If you don't agree with my ranking, that's fine. Just let me know your rank in the comments. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the ranking. And we actually begin with the album that I don't have in my collection yet, and that is the self-titled debut. I think this is a good album, but it's just more on the forgettable side in comparison to everything else in Killswitch Engage's discography. I do like the raw sound that you get with it, and this is of course whenever Jesse Leach was first on vocals, because he was the original vocalist out of the two vocalists of Killswitch Engage. But yeah, the debut album, it's pretty good. I don't mind this album, but it's just my least favorite. That's all. But next up, we got the second self-titled album, Killswitch Engage, the self-titled album with Howard. This is easily the weakest with Howard, I think. But I still think this album is pretty good. But the biggest problem with it is, well, similar complaints of the debut album. It's just kind of forgettable in comparison to the other stuff, and the songs on this just aren't as gripping as a lot of the other songs, especially in the Howard Jones era. But there's still some stuff I do like on this album. Never Again, Starting Over, pretty much the first half of the album is really good. But yeah, the second self-titled album, it's a pretty good album, but it's closer to the bottom for me. And I think a lot of people would actually agree that the two self-titled albums are their weakest, but still not bad. Now, I can definitely see some disagreements come in with this one, but next up we got Disarm the Descent. This is, of course, the comeback album with Jesse Leach on vocals. This is a really good album. I mean, of course, I think all Killswitch Engage's albums are really good, and this one's without exception, but out of the current era with Jesse Leach, this one is probably my least favorite out of the three with the current era of Jesse Leach, but this album is still really good. I mean, In Due Time, No End in Sight, and Always, these are some fantastic tracks. And yeah, I mean, there's not much wrong with the album, it just doesn't do much for me as much as the other stuff does. But yeah, Disarm the Descent is still a really good album though. Next up, we got The End of Heartache. Of course, the first album with Howard on vocals. This is a really good album, too. I mean, you got great songs on here, like Take This Oath, Rose of Sharon, whatever. The title track, World Ablaze, and many others. But yeah, The End of Heartache's a good album. Good debut for Howard, I'd say. But yeah, definitely one of their biggest albums. I know there's a lot of people that actually would have this at the top. For me, I wouldn't have it at the top, obviously, but I still think it's a great album. Anyways, next up we got As Daylight Dies, and this one is easily my favorite with Howard on vocals. I just think this album has some of his best performances with Killswitch Engage, and the songs on here are just absolutely fantastic. I mean, you got This Is Absolution, The Arms of Sorrow, My Curse, and Break the Silence, which I think is a really underrated Killswitch Engage song. But yeah, As Daylight Dies is it's a really good album. I mean, I got little complaints with it. I mean, if you consider yourself a metalcore fan, I mean, this is definitely an album you gotta check out. So yeah, As Daylight Dies, great album. So now we're in the top 3. Now at this point, you guys probably already know what the top 3 is. I can definitely see these next 2 being very unpopular, but just bear with me. Next up, we got Incarnate. Now, this was actually the album that got me into Killswitch Engage, or really helped me get into the band, so maybe that's why it's, in the top 3 for me. I know it may seem kind of biased to have this, at the top for that reason, because I know that this album is, tends to be at the bottom for a lot of people, or close to the bottom at least, but I don't know, I really dig this album. This is maybe their most diverse album, either this album or the next album on my ranking, but yeah, I do like Incarnate though. Hate by Design, Cut Me Loose, Strength of the Mind, Quiet Distress, It Falls on Me. I mean, these are some fantastic tracks. And yeah, at the time, this was, a fantastic album, and it still is a fantastic album. I think it's still one of their best. I know that's a rather unpopular opinion, but I don't know, I really dig this album. So, Incarnate. So at number 2, oh boy, I can definitely see some people disagreeing with this one. So at number 2, we got their newest album, Atonement. And this album, I instantly loved it at first listen. I mean, everything about this album is great. I think every song on here is actually really good. However, if I had to pick out some favorites, it would have to be The Signal Fire, Us Against the World, As Sure the Sun Will Rise, Ravenous, I Can't Be the Only One, Bite the Hand That Feeds. Yeah, you definitely get a lot of great songs on this album. I got the album around when it came out, and I remember instantly really liking it at first listen. Still an album that I think holds up fairly well today. I mean, I don't return to it a lot or anything, but I still think it's a very good album, and one of their best, actually. And I do think that this is the best album of Jesse Leach's current era. Such a great album. I know there's a lot of people that would have this at the closer to the bottom, but not for me. I think this album is really great, actually, and I think it's one of their best. So, Atonement. Now, lastly, at number 1, I'm actually kind of surprised I have this album at number 1, but I don't know, I really dig this album. This is one of the best metalcore albums of all time, I think. And at number 1, I got Alive or Just Breathing. This is one of those albums you just cannot go wrong with. I mean, an essential for any metalcore fan, I think. Definitely check out this album. It's really great. You've got great songs on here like Numbered Days, My Last Serenade, Just Barely Breathing, Element of One, and many others. But yeah, such a great album. There's many great songs on this album, and I don't know, I had to put this album at number 1. I think it's Killswitch Engage's best album. I think there's a lot of people that would agree on that as well. So, Alive or Just Breathing, it's my number 1. Well, there you go, guys. That is my ranking for the Killswitch Engage discography. Let me know what you guys think. How would you rank their discography? Feel free to let me know in the comments. And what do you think of my ranking? Please let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and take care.